At the family BBQ, while I was preparing snacks, my grandson came to me and whispered, "Grandma, I saw them pour something into your juice." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. It was one of those late summer afternoons when the air felt heavy with heat, the kind that made you move slower, talk softer, as though even words might break a sweat. The yard was alive with noise. The sizzle of the grill, children darting between lawn chairs, Linda shouting at Daniel to stop overcooking the chicken, Sarah laughing too loudly at something her husband said. And me? I was in the kitchen, as always, preparing the appetizers. It had become my role over the years. Not the host, not the guest of honor, but the one who filled the plates, sliced the bread, and kept everyone fed while they carried on around me. I didn't mind, not really. It gave me something to do with my hands, and it let me watch them from the window as they gathered in little circles, clinking glasses, trading stories I wasn't quite part of anymore. Still, I had come with hope. Family gatherings always carried a flicker of possibility. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today they'd remember I was more than the woman who brought casseroles and knitted scarves. I set the last tray on the counter, crackers, cheese, some deviled eggs, and turned to reach for the pitcher of juice when I heard soft footsteps behind me. "Grandma," a small voice whispered. It was Michael, 12 years old, my quietest grandson. He had his father's dark eyes, always watching, always noticing. He tugged at my sleeve until I crouched a little to meet his gaze. "What is it, honey?" I asked, brushing a curl from his forehead. He glanced toward the doorway to make sure no one was listening, then leaned close enough that I felt his breath against my cheek. His voice was barely more than a murmur. "I saw them," he said. "I saw them put something in your juice." For a moment, the room tilted. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What do you mean?" His eyes darted nervously toward the pitcher on the counter. They were by the table. Uncle Daniel and Mom. They poured something in. I think it was for you." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Thin, brittle. "Sweetheart, you must be mistaken. No one here would do such a thing." But he shook his head, his face pale and serious. "I swear, Grandma." I saw it. My hand tightened on the edge of the counter, the cool laminate grounding me. The voices outside floated in through the screen door. Laughter, the clink of bottles, the hiss of the grill. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds, and yet the world no longer felt ordinary at all. I forced a smile, patting his shoulder. "Thank you for telling me, Michael. But don't you worry. Go on now. Play with the others." He hesitated, his eyes searching mine, before he turned and slipped back outside. I stood there alone, staring at the innocent-looking pitcher, my reflection warped in its glass. My pulse thudded in my ears. If Michael was right, then someone at this table wanted me gone, and they thought I wouldn't notice. I carried the tray of appetizers out to the patio, my hands steady though my heart was not. The pitcher of juice sat on the counter behind me, untouched, its glass sides catching the light like a dare. I told myself Michael was just a child with an overactive imagination. Children saw shadows where there were none. Still, the way his voice trembled replayed in my head, and it was enough to make my stomach twist. "About time, Mom," Linda called, sweeping across the yard to relieve me of the tray. "People are starving." Her smile was wide, practiced, her hand brushing mine for only the briefest second before she turned her back and began arranging the food. I sank into a lawn chair near the edge of the group, pretending to fan myself with a paper napkin. From here, I could see everyone clearly. Daniel stood by the grill, tongs in one hand, beer in the other, his booming laugh too loud, too forced. Sarah leaned against the table, scrolling on her phone, her face aglow in the screen's light. And there was Michael, hovering near the swing set, his eyes flicking between me and the kitchen door. A moment later, Linda appeared with 2 glasses of juice in hand. "Here, Mom," she said brightly, pressing one into my palm. "You must be thirsty after all that work." I looked down at the glass, at the pale liquid with condensation sliding down its sides. It should have been refreshing, harmless, but I couldn't forget Michael's whisper. I raised it halfway to my lips, then paused. "Why don't you take this one?" I said, my voice warm, casual. "I'll get myself a soda. Juice is too sweet for me these days." Her smile faltered just for a second, so quick that anyone else might have missed it. Then she laughed, high and clear. "Suit yourself," she said, and handed the glass to Daniel instead. I watched closely as he took it, hesitated, then set it down on the picnic table without a sip. He reached for his beer instead. Something cold slid through me, colder than the drink had ever been. "Everything all right, Mom?" Linda asked, her eyes narrowing. "Of course," I replied, forcing my lips into a smile. Why wouldn't it be? But inside, I was screaming. The laughter rose again around me, the chatter of family filling the evening air. To anyone else, it was just another backyard barbecue, another Saturday spent together. But to me, every laugh sounded sharper, every smile more suspicious. Michael was right. I knew it now. Something was very, very wrong, and the hardest part was pretending I didn't know. The longer I sat there, the more every movement seemed loaded with meaning. Daniel flipped burgers at the grill, his laughter booming too often, as if to cover something else. Linda flitted between guests, her smile stretched thin, her voice pitched just a little too high. Even Sarah, usually glued to her phone, kept glancing my way, as though checking to see if I'd finished that glass. But the glass wasn't in my hand. It sat untouched on the table beside Daniel. Every time I looked at it, I felt the prickling reminder of Michael's whisper. "I saw them put something in your juice." I shifted in my chair, my eyes drifting over the table. Bowls of potato salad, corn on the cob wrapped in foil, bottles of ketchup and mustard lined up neatly. Ordinary things, familiar things, and yet none of it felt safe anymore. "Mom," Linda called suddenly, jolting me from my thoughts. "Aren't you going to eat something? You've been working in the kitchen all day." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes lingered on me with a sharpness that didn't match her words. "I will," I said calmly. "I'm just resting a bit." Watching everyone enjoy themselves, Sarah snorted from her spot on the porch steps. "You always say that, Grandma. You barely eat at these things. Just drink your juice." Her words cut through me, though her voice was playful enough to fool the others, almost as if she were reminding them, that I hadn't yet swallowed their offering. Michael's gaze caught mine across the yard. He gave the smallest shake of his head, quick, almost invisible, but enough to keep my hand from reaching for the glass. I rose slowly, brushing crumbs from my dress. "I'll bring some lemonade out," I said, smiling lightly. "Juice doesn't sit well with me anymore." Inside, the kitchen was cool, quiet, a relief after the buzzing tension outside. I poured myself a glass of water instead, my hands steady despite the storm brewing in my chest. Then, through the window, I watched them. Daniel left the grill and wandered over to the table, picking up the juice glass. He looked around quickly, then carried it back inside, setting it in the sink as though to erase its existence. But he didn't see me watching. My breath caught in my throat. Michael hadn't lied. There had been something in that drink, and Daniel knew it. The voices outside swelled again, laughter and chatter mixing with the sizzle of the grill. But I no longer heard them the same way. Every sound was sharpened by suspicion, every glance turned into a warning. This wasn't just family tension. This was something darker. And I was in the middle of it. I stood in the kitchen longer than I needed to, the cool air steadying me as I tried to calm the pounding in my chest. My first instinct was to call the police, to storm back outside and demand answers. But I knew better. Family or not, if someone had gone to such lengths to harm me, they wouldn't crumble at accusations. No, they'd smile, deny, make me out to be paranoid, confused, senile. And maybe that was the plan all along. So I swallowed my fear and carried my glass of water back outside, forcing my lips into the same easy smile I'd worn for decades at these gatherings. The smile that said, "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." I'm harmless." "Feeling better?" Linda asked, tilting her head. She was too quick, too eager. "Much better," I said lightly, easing back into my chair. "Just needed something refreshing." I lifted the water glass and took a deliberate sip. Her eyes lingered on me for a beat too long before she turned to fuss with the food again. Daniel clapped his hands together, announcing, "Dinner's ready." His voice carried an edge of relief, as though a line had been crossed and he was glad to move on. He piled plates high with meat, passing them around like nothing had happened. I ate sparingly, every bite like sawdust in my mouth, but I laughed when they laughed, nodded when they spoke, and kept my eyes open, sharp. At one point, Sarah leaned over, her tone sing-song but her words pointed. "Grandma, you didn't drink your juice, did you?" "You know it's not polite to waste," I met her gaze evenly. "You're right, dear," I said, my voice soft as butter. "I'll remember that next time." Her smile faltered, just for a moment, before she turned back to her phone. Michael drifted past me, brushing my hand lightly, a silent reassurance. I squeezed his fingers once before letting him go, grateful for the only ally I had. The rest of the evening blurred into chatter and clinking glasses. To anyone looking, we were just a family enjoying a summer night together. But under the surface, I felt the tension like a taut wire stretched too thin. When dusk settled and the fireflies came out, I excused myself early, claiming I was tired. Linda insisted on walking me to my car, her smile fixed, her words overly sweet. "Drive safe, Mom. You know we only want what's best for you." I smiled back, the same mask she wore. "Of course, dear. I know you do." But as I drove away, my hands gripping the wheel, I made myself a promise. I would not let them see me weak. I would not let them win. The drive home was dark and silent, save for the steady hum of the tires on the road. I replayed the evening over and over in my mind. The look in Linda's eyes, the way Daniel had carried that glass into the kitchen, Sarah's pointed little remark. If Michael hadn't spoken up, I might have swallowed whatever they had planned for me. The thought chilled me to the bone. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered on automatically, casting a warm glow across the familiar outline of my home. For the first time in years, it felt less like a place of comfort and more like a fortress. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, then set my handbag on the table with a long, shaky breath. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick on the wall. My mind spun with questions. Why? What would they gain from hurting me? Money? Control? Or was it just cruelty, a punishment for being a burden? By morning, I knew one thing. I couldn't let on that I suspected them. Not yet. If they thought I was blind, if they thought I was still the same naive woman who smiled through their sharp words, then I could buy myself time. Time to understand. Time to plan. So I slipped back into my role. When Linda called the next day, her voice syrupy sweet, I answered as though nothing had happened. "Yes, dear, of course I'm fine." The barbecue was lovely. You must give Daniel my thanks for grilling. She paused a beat too long before laughing. "Oh, you know him, Mom." Always eager to play chef, I kept my tone light, casual. "Yes, yes. You're lucky to have him, and that was how it began. My double game." Outwardly, I was the same grandmother I'd always been, polite, generous, dependable. But inwardly, every word, every glance, every slip of tone was a clue I tucked away. I began writing things down in a small notebook I kept hidden in the drawer by my bed. Times, dates, strange remarks. I sketched the glass of juice, the way Daniel had set it aside, the way Sarah had pressed me to drink it. Piece by piece, I built a picture no one else could see. And in that quiet, private work, I felt something stirring. Not just fear, but strength. The kind of strength I had forgotten I possessed. They thought they had fooled me. They thought I would never notice. But I was watching now, and I would not forget. 2 days after the barbecue, Michael came to visit. He'd ridden his bike over without telling anyone. His cheeks were flushed, his hair damp with sweat when I opened the door. "Grandma," he panted, "I had to talk to you." I ushered him inside quickly, glancing up and down the street to make sure no one had followed. Once the door was locked behind us, I set a glass of water in front of him at the kitchen table. He drank deeply before leaning forward, his voice hushed. I wasn't imagining it. I really saw them. Uncle Daniel had this little bottle. He poured it into your juice, and Mom told him to hurry before you came back. The words sent a shiver crawling down my spine. Did anyone else see? Michael shook his head. No, everyone else was outside. But I was looking for you. His eyes darted toward mine, wide and earnest. Grandma, why would they do that? I placed my hand over his, steadying him though my own pulse raced. I don't know, sweetheart. But you did the right thing telling me. Don't breathe a word to anyone else, do you hear? Not even to your mom. He nodded quickly, though his small hand trembled beneath mine. I sat back, the kitchen suddenly feeling colder than it should. If it had just been Daniel, I might have thought it some cruel, reckless prank. But Linda was involved, my own daughter. That knowledge cut deeper than any knife. What did the bottle look like? I asked carefully. Michael frowned, thinking hard. Small, like cough syrup, but clear. He kept it in his pocket. That was enough to confirm my worst suspicions. It wasn't a prank. It was planned. After Michael left, I walked through the house in silence, my thoughts racing. I opened the drawer by my bed and wrote down every detail, his description of the bottle, Linda's words, the way Sarah had pressed me to drink. Piece by piece, the picture grew darker. Money, that had to be it. I thought of the times Linda had hinted at my will, the way Daniel had asked, half joking, if I'd made arrangements. My chest tightened. Had I really raised children who would rather see me gone than wait their turn? I closed the notebook with a snap and pressed my palms flat against the cover. The old me would have cried, called them, begged for an explanation. But I wasn't that woman anymore. They had crossed a line, and I would not let them cross it again. The morning after Michael's visit, I went into the kitchen and opened the fridge. There, on the top shelf, sat a half-full pitcher of the juice I had carried home from the barbecue. I had thought about throwing it out, but something in me hesitated. Now, staring at it under the dull refrigerator light, I felt my decision harden. If I was going to protect myself, I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. I found an old mason jar in the cupboard, rinsed it thoroughly, and poured the juice inside. The liquid sloshed, innocent and sweet-smelling, but I handled it as though it might burn my hands. I sealed the lid tight, wrapped the jar in a towel, and tucked it into my shopping bag. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Dr. Harris, my neighbor 2 streets over. He'd retired from practice years ago but still tinkered in his home laboratory, helping friends with garden soil samples or odd medical curiosities. We'd been friends since his wife was alive, and I trusted him more than anyone else in town. He raised his brows when he opened the door. "Well now, Margaret, what's this?" "An odd favor," I said quietly, holding out the bag. "I need you to test something for me. Don't ask questions yet, just, please." His expression softened. "All right, come in." I sat in his study while he carried the jar away, my hands twisting in my lap. The old clock ticked loudly on the mantel, every second stretching like a rope pulled too tight. When he returned, his face was grave. He set the jar down on the desk between us. "You were right to bring this." My breath caught. "What is it?" "A sedative. Strong. Too strong for a casual dose. If you'd drunk a full glass, Margaret, you wouldn't have woken up for hours. Maybe longer." For a moment, the room spun. I clutched the arms of the chair, steadying myself. "So it wasn't my imagination." "No," he said firmly. "It wasn't." He leaned closer. "Do you want me to call the police?" I shook my head slowly. "Not yet." "Thank you, but this is a family matter." His eyes searched mine, but he didn't argue. "Then be careful." Whoever did this, Margaret, they meant harm. I nodded, though inside my fear had already begun to curl into something colder, sharper. Proof sat on the desk before me, and with it, the last of my doubts vanished. As I left his house, the jar wrapped once more in my bag, I whispered to myself a promise. They thought I was too old, too blind to see. But I was watching now, and I would not forgive. The following weekend, Linda invited me over again. "Just a small dinner," she said on the phone, her voice too bright, too polished. "We'd love to have you." Part of me wanted to refuse outright, but another part knew that declining would only raise suspicion. If I wanted to understand how far they were willing to go, I had to see it through. So I baked a pie, as I always did, and carried it to their front door with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The evening unfolded politely enough. Sarah chattered about work. Daniel bragged about a promotion he hadn't quite earned. Linda fussed over the roast. I sat at the table, nodding, answering when spoken to, my glass of water untouched beside me. After dessert, I excused myself, claiming I needed the bathroom. But instead of going upstairs, I lingered in the hallway where their voices carried clear as day. "She didn't drink it," Daniel muttered, frustration sharp in his tone. Linda sighed. "I told you she's cautious. Next time, we'll have to be smarter." Sarah's voice chimed in, smug. "She's old. It's only a matter of time." "Why rush?" "Because," Linda snapped, "the longer we wait, the less we'll get. The house, the savings. What if she changes her will?" My breath froze in my chest. So it was money. Not anger, not resentment, just cold calculation. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, counting the days until I was gone. Daniel grumbled. "We should have handled it already." "She's suspicious now," Sarah laughed lightly. "Oh, please, she's harmless." "She'll forget soon enough." I pressed a hand against the wall, steadying myself. Harmless. Forgetful. That's what they thought of me. A fragile old woman too weak to notice, too soft to fight back. I waited until their conversation shifted back to safer topics before returning to the table. My smile was warm, my voice gentle. "Everything all right in here?" I asked, sliding back into my chair. Linda beamed, too quickly. "Of course, Mom." We were just talking about vacation plans. I cut another slice of pie and placed it on my plate, my hands steady though my heart burned. Let them think I hadn't heard. Let them believe I was blind. Because the truth was clear now. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't mistaken. They wanted me gone. And they thought I'd never see it coming. But I had seen. I had heard. And though they didn't know it yet, the game had just shifted. That night, when I finally returned home, the silence of my house wrapped around me like a blanket and like a cage. I set my handbag on the table, removed my shoes, and sat in the darkened living room without even turning on the lamp. The words I'd overheard replayed in my mind again and again, sharper with each memory. Next time we'll have to be smarter. What if she changes her will? She's old. It's only a matter of time. I wanted to believe I'd misheard. I wanted to cling to some shred of doubt. But there was no doubt left. Their masks had fallen, and beneath the smiles and the hugs, there had been nothing but greed. I rose slowly and walked into my bedroom. From the drawer of my nightstand, I pulled out the notebook I'd been keeping since the barbecue. I flipped through the pages, my notes scrawled in shaky handwriting. The glass of juice, Michael's warning, Daniel hiding the bottle, Sarah's pointed words. And now, proof of motive, spoken in their own voices. The evidence sat there before me, undeniable. I thought of calling Dr. Harris, of telling him everything, maybe even letting him call the authorities. But what would that bring me? A public scandal. Lawyers. Trials. My name dragged through the mud while they painted me as senile, bitter, delusional. I knew them well enough to know they'd play the part of innocent children who'd been misunderstood. Number. I would not give them that chance. This wasn't about justice in a courtroom. This was about dignity, about protecting myself, and about letting them feel the weight of what they had done without me ever raising my voice. I sat at my desk, opened a fresh page in the notebook, and wrote 3 words across the top: my quiet revenge. What did that mean exactly? Not poison for poison, not deceit for deceit. No, I had something far more powerful than that. I had control over the one thing they wanted most: access. To my money, to my house, to my generosity, to me. And from that night on, they would have none of it. I closed the notebook, turned out the light, and slipped into bed. Sleep came easier than I expected, as though naming my plan had stripped the fear from my chest. They thought I was weak, an old woman waiting to be taken advantage of. But tomorrow, they would start to learn what it meant to live without me. The first step was small, so small they wouldn't notice right away. I stopped answering every call. When Linda rang the next morning, her number flashing on the screen, I let it buzz until the voicemail picked up. Her message was short, her voice already tinged with irritation. "Mom, call me back. We need to talk about the insurance forms, insurance. Always about money." I deleted it without listening twice. That afternoon, Daniel sent a text. "Car repairs again. Any chance you could help me out?" I stared at the words until they blurred, then slipped the phone into my drawer and shut it. No reply. By the end of the week, Sarah called with her own request. "Grandma, can you send cookies? You know I can't make them like you do." Normally, I would have been in the kitchen before she hung up, apron tied, oven warming. But this time, I sat in my chair, hands folded, and let the phone ring. It was harder than I expected. Every instinct in me wanted to rush, to soothe, to give. For years, that was how I had shown love, through casseroles, knitted scarves, folded bills tucked into cards. But I reminded myself of Michael's whisper, of the glass on the table, of Linda's voice snapping. What if she changes her will? Love had been twisted into expectation, and generosity into obligation. If I wanted to survive, I had to untangle myself from them. So I made lists. I reviewed my accounts, shifting money quietly into places they couldn't reach. I canceled the automatic transfers that had gone to Daniel when his rent was due, the loans Linda never repaid, the gifts Sarah had come to expect. It wasn't dramatic. It was careful, deliberate. At the grocery store, I bought only for myself. No extra bags of chips for Daniel's boys, no tins of cocoa for Sarah. When I baked in small portions, enough for one. And every night, I sat at my desk, notebook open, recording each change, each silence, each request unanswered. It wasn't revenge in the way they might have imagined. It was quieter, sharper. The calls became more frequent. Linda's tone shifted from polite to demanding. "Mom, are you ignoring me? We need you." Daniel tried charm. Best mother-in-law ever, right? Just a little help. Sarah sent texts filled with smiley faces that barely hid her impatience. I answered none of them. In the silence, I felt myself growing stronger. My house was peaceful again, my days filled with small pleasures I'd long neglected. Reading in the garden, taking slow walks, writing letters to friends who actually remembered me. For the first time in years, I wasn't giving myself away piece by piece. And though they didn't know it yet, my family was already starting to feel the absence. It didn't take long for the silence to stir trouble among them. I knew it would. For years, my money had patched their holes, my casseroles had filled their tables, my presence had soothed their quarrels. Without me, those seams began to unravel. I learned this not through direct calls, they had grown sparse as my refusal became obvious, but through Michael. He came to me one Saturday afternoon, bike propped against the porch, eyes wary. "They're fighting a lot," he said quietly, kicking at a loose board on the step. "Mom and Uncle Daniel. Even Sarah." I motioned him inside, poured him a glass of lemonade, and waited. Children tell the truth best when you give them space. He sipped, then whispered, "Uncle Daniel yelled at Mom last night. Said she promised you'd help with his car loan. She told him you're just being stubborn, that you'll come around." But then Sarah jumped in and said you were sick of them, that maybe you already changed your will." His words made my chest tighten, though I kept my face calm. "And what did your mother say to that?" Michael shrugged. "She said you'd never do that." But she looked scared. Scared. The word rang like a bell in my mind. Linda had always carried herself with certainty, as though the world bent to her needs. If fear had reached her, then she knew, deep down, that I had finally pulled away. That night, alone in my quiet house, I imagined the scene. Voices raised in the kitchen, Daniel's fist pounding the table, Sarah rolling her eyes, Linda snapping back. And underneath it all, the absence of me. My silence louder than any words. For years they had counted on me to smooth their quarrels, to hand over money or food or patience until the storm passed. But I wasn't there anymore. And without me, the cracks widened. A week later, Sarah herself called. I didn't answer, but her voicemail played out sharp and clear. "Grandma, you're tearing this family apart. We're all fighting because of you. Can't you just go back to the way things were?" I sat at the table listening, then pressed delete. My fingers didn't tremble this time. It wasn't me tearing them apart. It was them, finally seeing each other without the cushion I had always provided. And for once, I let the cracks spread. The first knock came on a Tuesday evening. I had just settled into my armchair with a book when the sharp rapping startled me. Through the curtain, I saw Daniel's car parked crookedly in my driveway. "Mom," his voice boomed when I didn't answer immediately. "Come on, open up. We need to talk." I stayed seated, my book open on my lap, though my eyes traced every shadow beyond the window. He knocked again, harder this time. "Look, I'm sorry about the other night. Whatever this is, whatever you think, let's just fix it, please. I really need your help." His words might have moved me once, but now they fell flat, hollow. I let the silence stretch until his footsteps retreated and his car pulled away. 2 days later, it was Linda. She came mid-morning, arms full of grocery bags, setting them on the porch like an offering. "Mom," she called, her voice strained. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is childish. You're hurting all of us. Please, open the door, talk to me." I watched from the window as she paced, phone in hand, muttering under her breath. Finally, she gathered the bags and stormed off, slamming her car door so hard the echo lingered long after she left. By Sunday, Sarah tried her turn. She arrived with a practiced smile, tapping gently instead of pounding. "Grandma," she said softly, almost sweetly, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. Can I come in? I miss you. I really do." For a moment, my hand twitched toward the doorknob. Her voice was so much like the little girl I used to bake cookies with, the child who'd curled up on my lap and begged for one more story. But then I remembered her laugh at the barbecue, sharp and mocking, the way she'd urged me to drink that glass. I stepped back, letting the house swallow me. Her voice faltered. "Please, Grandma." I didn't mean it. Silence answered her, and eventually her car joined the others in leaving my driveway. The visits didn't stop there. Some days they came together, arguing on my porch as if I couldn't hear every word. Other days it was just one of them, pleading, coaxing, even shouting. But my door stayed locked. Inside, I felt both heavy and light. Heavy with the grief of knowing how far my family had fallen, but light with the strength of finally holding firm. For once, I wasn't the one running after them, patching their wounds, feeding their hunger. Now they were the ones left waiting outside, and I was the one who chose silence. It happened on a gray afternoon, the kind where the clouds pressed low and the air smelled like rain. I heard them before I saw them. Car doors slamming, voices overlapping, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. When I peered through the curtain, my breath caught. All three of them. Linda at the front, arms crossed like a shield. Daniel looming behind her, his jaw tight, eyes restless. And Sarah, lingering at the edge, her face pale but determined. They didn't knock gently this time. Linda pounded hard enough to rattle the glass. "Mom! We're not leaving until you open this door." I stayed silent, my heart steady. "Come on," Daniel added, softer but no less insistent. "We need to sort this out. We're family." The word tasted bitter even as he spoke it. From the porch, Sarah's voice wavered. "Grandma, please. I'm sorry. I don't know why you're doing this. Just let us in." Their words pressed against the walls, against my chest. For weeks I had stayed quiet, letting my silence do the work. But now, something in me shifted. They wanted answers. Perhaps it was time to give them one. I stepped closer to the door, close enough that my voice carried through the wood. "Do you remember the barbecue?" A hush fell. "I remember," Linda said quickly. "It was a nice day." I almost laughed. "A nice day? When Michael had to warn me not to drink what you put in my glass?" The silence on the other side was sharp, broken only by Sarah's gasp. "You've lost your mind," Daniel snapped. "You don't know what you're talking about." But his voice cracked on the last word. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, stronger now. "I saw the way you looked at me. I heard your voices when you thought I was gone. I know what you wanted and I know why. Money, the house, my life, in exchange for your comfort." Their whispers turned frantic, Linda hissing at Daniel, Sarah insisting it wasn't true. But I pressed on, my voice calm, steady. "I gave you everything I could. My time, my care, my money, my love. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to take what little I had left." I let the weight of my words sink in before I finished. "This door will never open for you again. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." A heavy silence followed. Then the shuffle of feet, the low rumble of Daniel's anger, Linda's voice rising, Sarah's muffled sobs. I stepped back from the door, my chest tight but certain. For the first time, they knew that I knew. And that was enough. The silence that followed their visit lasted days, but it wasn't peace. Not at first. It was the kind of silence that hums in your ears, filled with echoes of words you can't take back. Every creak of the house reminded me of that moment at the door, of the way Linda's fist had hammered against the wood, of Sarah's muffled sobs, of Daniel's furious growl. But gradually, as the days stretched into weeks, the silence changed. It softened. It became the sound of freedom. I no longer woke to a phone buzzing with demands. No more hurried calls for money. No texts filled with excuses and half-hearted thank yous. The house stayed quiet, the way it used to when my husband was alive, when evenings were spent with a book and a cup of tea instead of my children's endless needs. Yet beneath the quiet, I wondered what was happening on their side. Michael came now and then, slipping away on his bike. He never said much, but his eyes told me plenty. He looked older somehow, as if he'd seen too much for 12 years. One afternoon, I asked gently, "How are things at home?" He shrugged, staring into his glass of lemonade. "They fight a lot. Uncle Daniel doesn't come around as much. Mom yells at Sarah all the time now. She says you're ruining everything." My chest tightened, though I kept my voice even. "Do you think I'm ruining everything?" Michael shook his head quickly. "No, I think they ruined it. You just stopped fixing it for them." His words settled deep inside me, a truth I hadn't dared name myself. For years, I had been the glue, patching, smoothing, filling in their cracks. And without me, the cracks had widened until they couldn't ignore them anymore. At night, lying in bed, I sometimes thought of Linda as a little girl, her hair in braids, her hand clutching mine as we crossed the street. I thought of Daniel as a boy, cheeks smudged with dirt, proudly showing me a frog he'd caught. I thought of Sarah, curled on my lap, sticky with cookie crumbs, asking for one more story before bed. I had loved them all fiercely, and I still did, in some quiet corner of my heart. But love without respect is a chain, and I had broken mine. When Michael left that day, I stood at the window and watched him pedal down the road, the evening sun stretching long shadows across the street. For the first time, I felt the ache of loss and the relief of freedom braided together. My family was breaking, and though it hurt, I knew it wasn't mine to fix anymore. Autumn came, painting the trees gold and crimson, the air sharp with wood smoke. My house felt warmer than it had in years, though nothing had changed inside except me. I spent mornings in the garden, afternoons with a book, evenings writing letters to the few friends who still remembered to check in. The phone hardly rang anymore. The silence that once felt like abandonment now felt like protection. Each day without their voices pressing against me was another day I reclaimed as my own. But one letter did come, an official envelope with Linda's handwriting scrawled across the corner. My will. She wanted to review it together, her words stiff, professional, as if I were a client instead of her mother. I didn't respond. Instead, I made an appointment with a lawyer in town. A kind woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, she listened carefully as I explained what I wanted. I want it clear, I said. Everything to Michael. He's the only one who stood by me. The rest, they've already had more than enough. The lawyer's pen scratched across the paper. Are you sure? Families can fight hard over these things. They already are, I replied softly. This way, there will be no fight left to have. When I walked out of her office, the weight I'd carried for months seemed to lift. My children had tried to decide my fate for me, but in the end, I had taken it back into my own hands. Weeks passed. One evening, just before winter settled in, I heard cars pull into the driveway again. I didn't bother looking through the curtain this time. I knew who it was. The pounding on the door began, voices rising, Linda shouting that they only wanted to talk, Daniel demanding explanations, Sarah's voice trembling with something between anger and fear. I let them shout. When the noise dipped into silence, I stepped close to the door and spoke quietly, firmly. You told me you couldn't wait. That it was only a matter of time. Well, I've given you time to think, and now you'll have the rest of your lives to live with what you did. I paused, listening to the stunned quiet on the other side. You wanted my house, my money, my life. You'll have none of them. My door is closed to you, forever. Their voices rose again, pleading, furious. But I walked back into the living room, sat in my chair, and opened my book. The sound of rain began to patter on the roof, drowning them out. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for them. For the first time, I was free.